everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Harry.
We have a wonderful group of poems written by modernist poets who were born in the late 19th century. E. Cummings, T.S. Eliot, Archibald MacLeish, Marianne Moore, and Hart Crane. Youth, love, aging, marriage, sea, death, told with musicality, high seriousness, satire, experimentation are some of the themes. The magnificent readers, in order of appearance, are Corinne Conley, John Towey, Helen Richman, Kay Weissman. Here's Corinne Conley.
Poems I'm reading are all by E. Cummings, starting with, "You shall above all things be glad and young." You shall above all things be glad and young, for if you're young, whatever life you wear, it will become you. If you are glad, whatever's living will yourself become. Girl boys may nothing more than boy girls need. I can entirely her only love, whose any mystery makes every man's flesh put space on, and his mind take off time. That you should ever think me, God forbid, and in his mercy, your true lover spare. For that way knowledge lies, the fetal grave called progress, and negation's dead undoom. I'd rather learn from one bird how to sing than teach 10,000 stars how not to dance. My father moved through dooms of love. My father moved through dooms of love, through sames of am, through halves of give, singing each morning out of each night. My father moved through depths of height. This motionless, forgetful where turned at his glance to shining here, that if so timid air is firm, under his eyes would stir and squirm, newly as from unburied which floats the first who, his April touch, drove sleeping selves to swarm their fates, woke dreamers to their ghostly roots. And should some why completely weep, my father's fingers brought her sleep. Vainly no smallest voice might cry, for he could feel the mountains grow. Lifting the valleys of the sea, my father moved through griefs of joy, praising a forehead called the moon, singing desire in to begin. Joy was his song, and joy so pure, a heart of star by him could steer, and pure so now, and now so yes, the wrists of twilight would rejoice. Keen as midsummer's keen beyond, conceiving mind of sun will stand, so strictly, over utmost him, so hugely, stood my father's dream. His flesh was flesh, his blood was blood, no hungry man but wished him food. No cripple wouldn't creep 1 mile uphill to only see him smile. Scorning the pomp of must and shall, my father moved through dooms of feel. His anger was as right as rain, his pity was as green as grain. Septembering arms of year extend, less humbly wealth to foe and friend, than he to foolish and to wise offered immeasurable is. Proudly, and by Octobering flame beckoned, as earth will downward climb, so naked for immortal work, His shoulders marched against the dark. His sorrow was as true as bread. No liar looked him in the head. If every friend became his foe, he'd laugh and build a world of snow. My father moved through days of we, singing each new leaf out of each tree. And every child was sure that spring danced when she heard my father sing. Then let men kill which cannot share. Let blood and flesh be mud and mire. Scheming imagine, passion willed, freedom a drug that's bought and sold, giving to steel and cruel kind, a heart to fear, to doubt a mind. To differ a disease of same, conform the pinnacle of them. Though dull, for all we taste as bright, bitter, all utterly things sweet, maggoty minus and dumb death, all we inherit, all bequeath, and nothing quite so least as truth. I say, though hate were why men breathe, because my father lived his soul. Love is the whole, and more than all. Anyone lived in a pretty how town. Anyone lived in a pretty how town, with up so floating many bells down. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. He sang his didn't, he danced his did. Women and men, both little and small, cared for anyone not at all. They sowed their isn't, they reaped their same. Sun, moon, stars, rain. Children guessed, but only a few, and down they forgot as up they grew. Autumn, winter, spring, summer, that no one loved him more by more, when by now and tree by leaf, she laughed his joy, she cried his grief. Bird by snow and stir by still, anyone's any was all to her. Sleep, wake, hope, and then they said their nevers and they slept their dream. Stars, rain, sun, moon, and only the snow can begin to explain how children are apt to forget to remember, with up so floating many bells down. One day, anyone died, I guess, and no one stopped to kiss his face. Busy folk buried them side by side, little by little and was by was, all by all and deep by deep, and more by more they dream their sleep. No one and anyone, earth by April, wish by spirit, and if by yes. Women and men, both dong and ding, summer, autumn, winter, spring, reaped their sowing, and went there came sun, moon, stars, rain. Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bill's defunct, who used to ride a water-smooth silver stallion and break 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pigeons just like that. Jesus, he was a handsome man. And what I want to know is, how do you like your blue-eyed boy, Mr. Death? The Cambridge ladies who live in furnished souls. The Cambridge ladies who live in furnished souls are unbeautiful and have comfortable minds. Also, with the church's Protestant blessings, daughters, unscented, shapeless, spirited. They believe in Christ and Longfellow, both dead. Are invariably interested in so many things. At the present writing, one still finds delighted fingers knitting for the, what is it? Owls? Perhaps. While permanent faces coyly bandish scandal of Mrs. M and Professor D. The Cambridge ladies do not care. Above Cambridge, if sometimes in its box of sky lavender and cornerless, the moon rattles like a fragment of angry candy. All in green went my love riding. All in green went my love riding, on a great horse of gold into the silver dawn. 4 lean hounds crouched low and smiling. The merry deer ran before. Fleeter be they than dappled dreams, the swift, sweet deer, the red, rare deer. 4 red roebuck at a white water the cruel bugle sang before. Hornet hip, my love went riding, riding the echo down into the silver dawn. 4 lean hounds crouched low and smiling, the level meadows ran before. Softer be they than slippered sleep, the lean, lithe deer, the fleet flown deer. 4 fleet does at a gold valley the famished arrow sang before. Bow-at belt went my love riding, riding the mountain down into the silver dawn. 4 lean hounds crunched, low and smiling, the sheer peaks ran before. Paler be they than daunting death, the sleek, slim deer, the tall, tense deer. 4 tall stags at a green mountain, the lucky hunter sang before. All in green went my love riding, on a great horse of gold into the silver dawn. 4 lean hounds crouched low and smiling. My heart fell dead before.
Our next reader, thank you, Corinne, that was fabulous. Our next reader is John Towey.
Hi, Harry. At the beginning of the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, Harry, there are 6 lines of Italian, and I don't know the translation of them, that precede the poem. I could say them, but I don't understand them, and I don't think anybody else would. So let me just start with the poem. Okay, can you hear me, Harry?
Absolutely, good
All right.
idea.
So this is the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and I'll just do it. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels, and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stared in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was soft October night, curled once around the house and fell asleep. And indeed, there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create. And time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And indeed, there will be time to wonder, do I dare? And do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say, how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin, they will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute, there's time for decisions and revisions. With a minute, we'll reverse. For I've known them all already, known them all. Have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I've measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voice dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a farther room. So how should I presume? And I've known the eyes already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I'm formulated, sprawling on a pin, when I'm pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how shall I begin to spit out all the butt ends of my days and ways? And how should I presume? And I've known the arms already. I've known them all. Arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the moonlight, downed with light brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along the table or wrap about a shawl? And should I then presume, and how should I begin? Shall I say, I've gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows? I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floor of silent seas. And the afternoon, the evening, sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crises? But though I've wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I've seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I'm no prophet, and here is no great matter. I've seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I've seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker. And in short, I was afraid. And would it have been worth it, after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all. I shall tell you all. If one settling a pillow by her head should say, this is not what I meant at all. That's not it. at all. And would it have been worth it, after all? Would it have been worthwhile, after the sunsets in the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor, and this, and so much more? It is impossible to say just what I mean. But as if a magic lantern threw the nerves in patterns on a screen, would it have been worthwhile if one, settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window, should say, "That is not it at all. That's not what I meant at all. I'm not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. I'm an attendant lord, one that will do to swell a progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince, no doubt, an easy tool, deferential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse. At times, indeed, almost ridiculous, and almost at times, the fool. I grow old. I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. Oh, I've heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back when the wind blows the water white and black. We've lingered in the chambers of the sea by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us and we drown. It's the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Now I'm to read also, this is, should I go on, Harry?
Absolutely.
Yes, this is Archibald MacLeish's Ars Poetica, which means the art of poetry. A poem should be palpable and mute as a globed fruit, dumb as old medallions to the thumb, silent as the sleeve-worn stone of casement ledges where the moon has grown. A poem should be wordless as the flight of birds. A poem should be motionless in time as the moon climbs, leaving as the moon releases twig by twig the night-entangled trees. Leaving as the moon behind the winter leaves, memory by memory, the mind. A poem should be motionless in time as the moon climbs. A poem should be equal to not true. For all of the history of grief, an empty doorway and a maple leaf. For love, the leaning grasses and two lights above the sea, a poem should not mean, but be.
That was terrific, John.
Oh.
Our next reader is Helen Richman.
Marriage by Marianne Moore. This institution, perhaps one should say enterprise, out of respect for which one says one need not change one's mind about a thing one has believed in, requiring public promises of one's intention to fulfill a private obligation. I wonder what Adam and Eve think of it by this time. This fire-gilt steel, alive with goldenness, how bright it shows of circular traditions and impostures, committing many spoils, requiring all one's criminal ingenuity to avoid. Psychology, which explains everything, explains nothing, and we are still in doubt. Eve, beautiful woman, I have seen her when she was so handsome, she gave me a start. Able to write simultaneously in 3 languages, English, German, and French, and talk in the meantime. Equally positive in demanding a commotion and in stipulating quiet. I should like to be alone. To which the visitor replies, I should like to be alone. Why not be alone together? Below the incandescent stars, below the incandescent fruit, the strange experience of beauty. Its existence is too much. It tears one to pieces, and each fresh wave of consciousness is poison. See her in this common world, the central flaw in that first crystal fine experiment, this amalgamation which can never be more than an interesting impossibility. Describing it as that strange paradise, unlike flesh, stones, gold, or stately buildings, the choicest piece of my life, the heart rising in its estate of peace as a boat rises with the rising of the water. Constrained in speaking of the serpent, shed snakeskin in the history of politeness, not to be returned to again, that invaluable accident exonerating Adam. And he has beauty also. It's distressing. The "O thou to whom, from whom, without whom nothing, Adam." Something feline, something colubrine, how true. A crouching mythological monster in that Persian miniature of emerald mines, raw silk, ivory white, snow white, oyster white, and 6 others. That paddock full of leopards and giraffes, long lemon yellow bodies sewn with trapezoids of blue, alive with words vibrating like a cymbal touched before it has been struck. He has prophesied correctly the industrious waterfall, the speedy stream, which violently bears all before it, at one time silent as the air, and now as powerful as the wind, treading chasms on the uncertain footing of a spear, forgetting that there is in woman a quality of mind which is, as an instinctive manifestation, is unsafe. He goes on speaking in a formal, customary strain of past states, the present state, seals, promises, the evil one suffered, the good one enjoys, hell, heaven, everything convenient to promote one's joy. In him, a state of mind perceives what it was not intended that he should. He experiences a solemn joy in seeing that he has become an idol, plagued by the nightingale in the new leaves with its silence, not its silence, but its silences. He says of it, it clothes me with a shirt of fire. He dares not clap his hands to make it go on, lest it should fly off. If he does nothing, it will sleep. If he cries out, it will not understand. Unnerved by the nightingale and dazzled by the apple, impelled by the illusion of a fire effectual to extinguish fire, compared with which the shining of the earth is but deformity. A fire as high, as deep, as bright, as broad, as long as life itself. He stumbles over marriage, a very trivial object indeed, to have destroyed the attitude in which he stood, the ease of the philosopher, unfathered by a woman, unhelpful Hymen, a kind of overgrown Cupid, reduced to insignificance by the mechanical advertising, parading as involuntary comment, by that experiment of Adams with ways out but no way in, the ritual of marriage, augmenting all its lavishness, its fiddlehead ferns, lotus flowers, opuntias, white dromedaries, its hippopotamus, nose and mouth combined in one magnificent hopper, its snake and the potent apple. He tells us that for love that will gaze an eagle blind, that is with Hercules climbing the trees in the garden of the Hesperides. From 47 to 70 is the best age, commending it as a fine art, as an experiment, a duty, or as merely recreation. One must not call him ruffian, nor friction a calamity, the fight to be affectionate. No truth can be fully known until it has been tried by the truth of disputation. The blue panther with black eyes, the basalt panther with blue eyes, entirely graceful. One must give them the path. The black obsidian Diana, who darkeneth her countenance as a bear doth, the spiked hand that has an affection for one, and proves it to the bone. Impatient to assure you that impatience is the mark of independence, not of bondage. Married people often look that way, seldom and cold, up and down, mixed and malarial, with a good day and a bad. We Occidentals are so unemotional, self-lost, the irony preserved in the Ahasuerus tete-a-tete banquet, with its small orchids like snakes' tongues, with its good monster lead the way with little laughter and munificence of humor in that quixotic atmosphere of frankness in which 4 o'clock does not exist. But at 5 o'clock, the ladies, in their imperious humility, are ready to receive you. In which experience attests that men have power, and sometimes one is made to feel it. He says, what monarch would not blush to have a wife with a hair like a shaving brush? The fact of woman is not the sound of the flute, but very poison. She says, men are monopolists of stars, garters, buttons, and other shining baubles, unfit to be the guardians of another person's happiness. He says, these mummies must be handled carefully. The crumbs from a lion's meal, a couple of shins, and the bit of an ear. Turn to the letter M, and you will find that a wife is a coffin. That severe object with the pleasing geometry, stipulating space, not people, refusing to be buried and uniquely disappointing, revengefully wrought in the attitude of an adoring child to a distinguished parent. She says, this butterfly, this waterfly, this nomad that has proposed to settle on my hand for life, what can one do with it? There must have been more time in Shakespeare's day to sit and watch a play. You know so many artists who are fools. He says, you know so many fools who are not artists. The fact forgot that some have merely rights while some have obligations. He loves himself so much, he can permit himself no rival in that love. She loves herself so much, she cannot see herself enough. A statuette of ivory on ivory, the logical last touch to an expansive splendor earned as wages for work done. One is not rich, but poor when one can always seem so right. What can one do for them, these savages, condemned to disaffect all those who are not visionaries, alert to undertake the silly task of making people noble? This model of Petrine fidelity who leaves her peaceful husband only because she has seen enough of him. That orator reminding you, I am yours to command. Everything to do with love is mystery. It is more than a day's work to investigate this science. One sees that it is rare, that striking grasp of opposites opposed each to the other, not to unity, which in cycloid inclusiveness has dwarfed the demonstration of Columbus with the egg. A touch of simplicity, that charitive Euroclydon of frightening disinterestedness, which the world hates admitting. I am such a cow. If I had a sorrow, I should feel it a long time. I am not one of those who have a great sorrow in the morning and a great joy at noon, which says I have encountered it among those unpretentious protégés of wisdom, where seeming to parade as the debater and the Roman, the statesmanship of an archaic Daniel Webster persists to their simplicity of temper as the essence of the matter. Liberty and union now and forever. The book on the writing table, the hand in the breast pocket.
That was fabulous, Helen. Thank you very much. Our next reader is Kay Weissman.
This is Voyages by Hart Crane. Above the fresh ruffles of the surf, bright striped urchins flay each other with sand. They have contrived a conquest for shell shucks, and their fingers crumble fragments of baked weed, gaily digging and scattering. And in answer to their treble interjections, the sun beats lightning on the waves fold thunder on the sand. And could they hear me, I would tell them, oh, brilliant kids, frisk with your dog, fondle your shells and sticks bleached by time and the elements. But there is a line you must not cross, nor ever trust beyond it, spry cordage of your bodies to caress too lichen faithful from too wide a breast. The bottom of the sea is cruel. And yet, this great wink of eternity, of rimless floods, unfettered leewardings, samite sheeted and processed where her undinal vast belly moonward bends, laughing the rapt inflections of our love. Take this sea, whose diapason kneels on scrolls of silver snowy sentences, the scepter terror of whose sessions rends as her demeanors motion well or ill, all but the pieties of lovers' hands. And onward, as bells off San Salvador salute a crocus lusters of the stars, in these poinsettia meadows of her tides, adagios of islands, O my prodigal, complete the dark confessions her veins spell. Mark how her turning shoulders wind the hours, and hasten while her penniless rich palms pass superscription of bent foam and wave. Hasten while they are true. Sleep, death, desire close round one instant in one floating flower. Bind us in time, O seasons clear and awe, O minstrel galleons of Carib fire, bequeath us to no earthly shore until answered in the vortex of our grave, the seal's wide spendthrift gaze towards paradise. Infinite consanguity it bears, this tender theme of you that light retrieves from sea plains, where the sky resigns a breast that every wave enthralls. While ribboned water lanes I wind are laved and scattered with no stroke wide from your side, whereto this hour the sea lifts also reliquary hands, and so, admitted through black swollen gates that must arrest all distance otherwise, past whirling pillars and lithe pediments, light wrestling there incessantly with light, star kissing star through wave on wave unto your body rocking, and where death, if shed, presumes no carnage, but this single change upon the steep floor flung from dawn to dawn, the silken, skilled, transmembrant of song. Permit me voyage, love, into your hands, whose counted smile of hours and days suppose I know a spectrum of the sea, and pledge vastly now parting gulf on gulf of wings, whose circles bridge, I know, from palms to the severe, chilled albatross's white immutability. No stream of greater love advancing now than singing this immortality alone, through clay aflow immortality to you. All fragrance, irrefragibly, and clay madly meeting logically in this hour, and region that is ours to wreath again, portending eyes and lips, and making told the chancel port and portion of our June. Shall they not stem and close in our own steps bright staves of flowers and quills today, as I must first be lost in fatal tides to tell? In signature of the incarnate word, the harbor shoulders to resign in mingling mutual blood, transpiring as foreknown and widening noon within your breast, for gathering all bright insinuations that my years have caught, for islands where must lead involubly blue latitudes and levels of your eyes. In this expectant, still exclaim, receive the secret ore and petals of all love. Meticulous, past midnight in clear rhyme, infrangible and lonely, smooth as though cast together in one merciless white blade, the bay estuaries fleck the hard sky limits. As if too brittle or too clear to touch, the cables of our sleep so swiftly filed already hang, shred ends from remembered stars, one frozen, trackless smile. What words can strangle this deft moonlight? For we are overtaken. Now no cry, no sword can fasten or deflect this tidal wedge, slow tyranny of moonlight, moonlight loved and changed. There's nothing like this in the world, you say, knowing I cannot touch your hand and look too into that godless cleft of sky where nothing turns but dead sands flashing. And never to quite understand. No, in all the argosy of your bright hair, I dreamed nothing so flagless as this piracy. But now, draw in your head, alone and too tall there, your eyes already in the slant of drifting foam, your breath sealed by the ghosts I do not know. Draw in your head and sleep the long way home, where icy and bright dungeons lift of swimmers their lost morning eyes, and ocean rivers churning shift green borders under stranger skies, steadily as a shell secretes its beating leagues of monotone, or as many waters through the sun's red kelson past the cape's wet stone. O rivers mingling toward the sky, and harbor of the phoenix breast, my eyes pressed black against the brow, thy derelict and blinded guest. Waiting, a fire. What name, unspoke, I cannot claim. Let thy waves rear more savage than the death of kings, some splintered garland for the seer. Beyond Sirocco's harvesting, the saltest thunders crept away, like a cliff swinging or a sail flung from April's inmost day. Creation's blithe and petaled word to the longed goddess when she rose, conceding dialogue with eyes that smile unsearchable repose. Still fervent covenant, Belial, unfolded floating dais before which rainbows twine continual hair. Belial, white echo of the oar. The imaged word it is that holds hushed willows, anchored in its glow. It is the unbetrayable reply, whose accent no farewell can know. You're welcome.
All for such beautiful readings. I think, I know nobody can read better than you. You've all done such marvelous jobs. The vitality, the clarity, the deep resonance, it just moves me so deeply. And I would just like to, we can talk about what we read and what, modernism, if you like. But for me, the two lines in E. Cummings, you shall above all things be glad and young, are important. And that is the last two that Corinne read. I'd rather learn from one bird how to sing than teach 10,000 stars how not to dance. I believe that's what we're doing, lifting up great poetry, all different types of modernist poetry. I mean, you have T.S. Eliot, classicist. You have E. Cummings, experimentalist, Marianne Moore, satire, Hart Crane, the Elizabethan hard-edged Elizabethan language, and MacLeish, his philosophy about about a poem should just be. So let's just start with, in the order that we read, let's start with Corinne and go around in the order and just talk about whatever you would like to talk about the reading, the poems you read, or whatever you would like to read or say.
I think we poetry readers must meet sometime in the patio or something and discuss more fully what we've gotten out of these certain poets that we read. Before I speak, one thing I did appreciate hearing today was the Archibald MacLeish's comment that a poem should not mean, it should just be. So that's what I say to myself when I'm reading some of this, because, E.E. Cummings certainly had a wonderful sense of fun, kind of underneath great seriousness, it seems to me. The fact that he would just abandon anything like verbs and nouns and adjectives and made nouns verbs and verbs nouns, like what was it? He danced his didn't, he sang his did. He does that a lot. And in other poems too, not just in one particular poem, but in other poems, he just simply makes where, when, a major topic. Yes, so it's if you're reading him, and certainly if you read him aloud, it's as though he's accompanying you. It's kind of like music underneath. It's surprising, you kind of hear chords. So it is fun to the other readers to pick up E.E. Cummings and just read it aloud and swing along with it.
One thing about E.E. Cummings, his dad was a preacher, and so he would see those little phrases on the marquee every Sunday. And so that may feed into it too, but I like what you said. And you have, we're here to talk. You mentioned about we can just talk about what we heard. We don't have to be in the patio. This is our patio right here. So you can say whatever you like. If you want to say anything more, Corinne, or you want Helen to talk.
I want Helen to talk.
Oh, well, did you want to go in order, though, Harry? Because it was
Yeah, that's right, John. You're right, John.
Well, I just have a couple of things to say. He wrote this poem. T.S. Eliot wrote the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock in 1910, but it was Ezra Pound who convinced it to be published, but not until 5 years later in 1915. So, but I wanted to say something about the name, which I looked up when I was trying to figure out this poem. T.S. Eliot emasculated him with the name of Prufrock. It comes from the word prude and frock, which is a woman's dress. And so he emasculated him with the name. And as you can hear with this, he's so insecure about his relation to women and just life. He's scared. And it's just an interesting, crazy poem. But why he decided to emasculate him with the name, I don't know. And the other poem is kind of, the Archibald MacLeish thing is kind of clear. I mean, it's so, there's so many poetic lines in it. Here's the first line. A poem should be palpable and mute as a globed fruit. I just love that. And just every one of those little double lines has an image that you can go round and round in your head with. That's really all I wanted to say. I was just shocked that the name Prufrock was derived from those two words, prude and frock.
You mentioned Ezra Pound, and just talking about an overview of what modernism is. Mm-hmm. You could start with Pound. You can go back to Walt Whitman in 1855, who broke the heave, created the America's own speech with the vernacular, and also broke the new wood in both of those. And then you go to the end of the century, in 1899, you have Freud's the interpretation of dreams, and then you have the Arthur Simon's the anthology of the symbolists, or the symbolist anthology, and those both fed into the 20th century. And Pound, with his phrase "make it new," it's not a new phrase. It's probably got from some Chinese classical poet, possibly Confucius. But he's the guy who put American poetry on the map. He changed the course of modernist poetry. Later on, he turned out to be a bad guy, but he got deranged. But that's another story. But he put T.S. Eliot, H.T. Frost, many poets on the map. And so he was certainly important. He cut the wasteland. And so, I think they probably had nicknames for each other, Old Possum or something like that, Pound called him. I'm no expert on all that, but that's one thing. And so let's go on to Helen, please. Yeah.
Oh, well, satire, she's the epitome she has a way of getting to the heart of the matter of what she is speaking, and then completely satirizing it. And it's kind of fun, and but I don't know her other poems, and I don't know what other subjects that she covers, but I hope she feels a little bit differently about some of the things in life than she does about marriage, because She sure is anti-marriage, but I absolutely loved reading it. I mean, it's an actor's dream to read kind of poetry that she writes. When I was in school as a youngster, I mean, all I knew was Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, "The children's hour, between the dark and the daylight, when the night is beginning to lower, comes a pause in the day's occupation that is known as the children's hour." And I stayed with that kind of poetry for years because I was busy being a drama student or whatever, and I wasn't reading poetry. So this is a whole new experience for me to examine poetry, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm certainly learning. And I thank you, Harry, for this opportunity.
Well, you're great. And, Marianne Moore, she slept with her mother for many years. It is a satire, and you did a fabulous job with that. She also worked at, as you might call, syllabics, the number of syllables going down the poem. And also she used a lot of quotes from other sources. She didn't name them in the poem, but you remember seeing them on the page in quotes. So it's somewhat like a collage. So another influence in modernism, in Eliot's work, we see the wasteland, how it's fragmented, it's difficult. There are many classical allusions in there. Is cubism. I mean, and her too, the way she put this together. And she wanted to write poems that dogs and cats could understand. And so she was pretty unique woman and poet. But, all these people are very different. And then just to go back to E.E. Cummings for a minute, the way he would break up syntax and create his own language. Another woman who was very important in the modernist movement was Gertrude Stein, where she would, use, like a new syntax, and it would be surface and repetition and create her world right there on the page. And so this
is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper.
Yeah. I had a professor in college, and he was talking about that you could look at modern literature, American literature, in two ways. You could look at Hemingway, by being a reporter. He worked for the Kansas City Star and then the Toronto Star. I believe that were the names of the places. And then he became, a reporter, and then he was a writer who would look at objectively what was out in the world and put that down. And obviously he created a style. And Gertrude Stein was more inner, and she was a big influence on the poets, the rhythmical, nonsensical, sometimes what the hell she was talking about. But those, he said, were the two branches of American literature. I don't know if you would agree with that, but that's one thing. And I loved listening to you read the marriage, because I wondered about all of those different items that she has in there. You did it beautifully, as everybody else did with their work.
There were a couple of words that caught my attention. Can you hear me?
Yep.
In, I guess it was Helen's thing. I may have this wrong, but I just have never heard this combination of words before. Unhelpful hymen. Was that in yours, Helen? It's just such an odd mix of words. Is that right, Helen? Was that in your poem?
Also about the part where the men commanded the women and all those things, and the woman is a coffin. I mean, all those, misogynistic terms. And then, what I loved about it was, the one quote where she said, everything to do with love is a mystery, which really is true.
Yes, it is.
It's a mysterious force. Yeah. But thank you all. And also Kay Weissman.
Well, unfortunately, I was not able to hear very well. So I'm glad I taped this so that I can go back home and listen to everybody. I'm just so impressed with everybody else's work, and I'm really very honored to be here. As far as Hart Crane is concerned, I had a lot of problems with this because I couldn't figure it out. But as I read it over and over and over again, I started to love the words, his choice of words. And I knew that he had committed suicide by jumping off of a ship. And that before that, he had written this Voyages. And it made me so sad about his life. And yet, when I read the words, I don't think it's sad, except that this one line is, the bottom of the sea is cruel, that he should have written that line and yet committed suicide is something to think about. But it's all the words just seem to be like a painting to me, like a painting that I couldn't quite understand, but that I liked seeing. So it's something that I could read over and over again and get something out of, hopefully by the time I'm 90.
That's one of the beauties. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Kay, I'm sorry. But that's one of the beauties of poetry, the mystery. We keep reading them over and over again. I mean, how many novels can you read over and over again? But a poem, Hart Crane's The Bridge or Voyages, you can read over and over again. And he was a visionary, as you know. The poems, a couple of poems that I wrote down were light wrestling there incessantly with light. And the other one, permit me voyage, love into your hands. So he was a young man who grew up in the Cleveland area in Ohio, and his dad, had a candy store, a big candy store. I forget the product, but he went to New York City when he was young, and he met a lot of literary people in the small press world, and he started getting his poetry published. And then from, I don't know when it was, 1923 to late 20s, he wrote The Bridge. And he would drink a lot, and he would listen to music, and he would get into an ecstasy. And the poetry was very Elizabethan, as I said earlier. And also, he was a continuation of Walt Whitman. In The Bridge, he does like a section devoted to Walt Whitman about being his brother. And he was a young, wonderful poet. So I love all of these people. And I think we did a nice selection, and also free verse. The other thing that I think is important in looking at modernism is the free verse, how people use free verse. Also, the Imagist poets in the early part of the 20th century, their use of the real physical object and using no word that does not add up to the whole, and not using the metronome, but your own inner rhythms. And the other thing is the objectivists who came later, Rakowski, Oppen, and others, and they would just look at, images and build a poem out of images. And then, the thing about free verse, or, the images, they did it also to get rid of the padding. You look back at some of these old great works, there's so much in there, it's just used to make a rhyme. And these people seem to make rhymes without that padding, which is a good thing. And there were a lot of things, obviously, we can think of that, feed into the modernism, like the airplane, the car, on and on, and then if you go back into philosophical ideas, or, you have Darwin, Nietzsche, people like that, Marx. So, and then the war, the Second World War, coming, all those people writing in the, before and after and during the war, all the ruins of Europe. And then just lastly, for me, the T.S. Eliot, as John was pointing out, he wrote that as a young man, but he was portraying an old man. And I remember the first time I heard it, I thought, how can he, empathize with that state so well? And he did it just marvelously. Anybody else want to feed in, talk some more? I mean, we have time. Corinne?
Well, I'll name drop a little bit, because I did meet Archibald MacLeish
Wow.
Because, yes, my sister was his secretary for some time.
Oh.
He was the Librarian of Congress, and she was his secretary while he was the Librarian of Congress. So I met him in Washington, yes. I had no idea, of course, at that time that he was a poet, although...
What did she say about him, Corinne?
Oh, uh-huh.
What did she say about him?
Was she absolutely nothing that I recall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely nothing that I recall.
She just worked for him. Yeah.
She's gone now, so but I would be really, I'd really love to ask her.
Yeah.
I had no idea, certainly at that time, that he, or maybe he wasn't quite so famous. I think I knew he was a poet somehow. She may have mentioned that, but yes. Well, my sister, although she worked at the Library of Congress, I wouldn't say she was extremely literary and certainly not poetic. So perhaps his charm was lost on her. I don't know.
Well, another thing, Corinne, I noticed on the shelf outside your room, you have a picture. Don't you have a picture of Buffalo Bill?
Yes, I do, and I love my Buffalo Bill poem. Wasn't that fun?
Yes, very much.
That was so cute. But I've got to ask these are the kind of questions that I like to ask. What did he mean when he said, what I want to know at the end? He said, she said, I said, what I want to know is, how do you like your blue-eyed boy, Mr. Death?
Well, and he killed a lot of animals. Buffalo Bill out there killing the buffalo.
But I thought, how do you like your blue-eyed boy? But I thought she was talking to Mr. Death about her blue-eyed boy being Buffalo Bill.
That's it. Well, that's it. She's asked, maybe, Buffalo Bill had died at that time. I don't know what year he died. What was his name? Cody? His last name Cody?
Yes. Wild Bill Cody, yeah.
Yeah.
Cody. And my grandfather, that's my connection to showbiz. My grandfather was his double in the Wild West shows.
No.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
That's it. That's my connection to show business.
Wow.
My grandfather, he was a state senator in Nebraska, and lived in the town of Hastings, where Harry Northup lived. That's where my mother was born, and a long line of pioneers there.
Didn't know that.
And Granddad, if you come by my room and I have the picture, Granddad is dressed exactly like always to the day he died. Always wore his 10-gallon hat and always looked like Buffalo Bill. He was more handsome than Buffalo Bill. I said, had a wonderful goatee. And he was 20 years younger, I believe. But he liked it, yes. When Buffalo Bill wasn't free to go in the Wild West, a granddad could ride in on his horse and they didn't know the difference.
Wow.
Yeah.
One thing I would like to say about you reading is you're all actors, and Kay, I know, is also a dancer. And, we do a play, or you have monologues, obviously, but film and TV, less monologues. And that's why sometimes you see a film that's a stage play and it's hard to transfer a monologue, those monologues on the film. But the point I'm trying to get to, usually our dialogue is intermittent with each other. But here, when we're reading these poems, you have a long length to get into the poem and to read. And I think it's good for me, to hear, and for my own self, when I read, it strengthens my sense, almost by I don't know what the word is, osmosis, to strengthen my sense of narrative and help me understand it more, and also strengthens breath. But it's really good for the soul and for the physical body, for each one of us, I believe, to do this. And the concentration that we go through to be, to take these different types of poems and really explore them. Sometimes we don't even know them. And sometimes I'll be reading some And I'll wonder, I don't know what the hell this means. And yet you keep on going. And, we've really had a wonderful time, not only today, but all the time since all of you have been reading. I just feel so grateful that Jennifer asked me to do the show and that I asked you, or you came to us to ask to participate, because it's really been a godsend for me. And it's very exhilarating and nourishing to me. Anybody else feel any similar?
Well, I'm very grateful, and I say that to you, Harry, all the time. I think it's just, there are many wonderful things about being here, and the great year I've done so. But really, reading the poetry here, I wouldn't say kept me alive, but really, no matter where I'd been, if I'd been reading this poetry, I'm sure my life would have been enriched, and it certainly was here by getting a chance to read it. Certainly not always to understand it, but to try and to read about all the poets and their fantastic lives. Much more exciting than Hollywood celebrities, I have to say. The poets' lives, some of them are extremely, sometimes creepy, but strange and wonderful. So it's just been it's been a wonderful thing for me. Yes, thanks.
And me too. I love it. I had read Alfred Prufrock before, but not to the depths that I discovered this time, and reading summaries and different people analyzing the poet. And it's great fun, Harry. It's great fun. And I'm learning a lot. And I love it. Thank you.
I feel the same way. I feel excited to hear the other readers and to learn about the poets. And at this stage, to be able to be learning something, I think it's terrific.
And I like to get my creative juices working. And Harry, thank you for that. I would miss it if I weren't doing it.
And, just to go back to E. Cummings for a minute, if I may, I remember the first time I read him, and I would see all those poems written in little letters and making his own syntax, his own, as Corinne pointed out, use almost dyslexia way of using when and where, but the musicality of it, and then there was a time in the early 70s where people would, you read E. Cummings, they would put him down, but he's always been, up there with me. And he's also, in many ways, I think, a middle-class poet, because he's a singer. He sings, he dances in his poetry, and we all want that. Whether, as Corinne read that poem, My Father Moved Through Dooms of Love, it's exalting, even though we understand it. As she said, the seriousness underneath it, there is a musicality and a dance and a great use of language that lifts us up. And they're all, simple Anglo-Saxon one-syllable words. They're not, real long, odd words, but he's just fabulous. And all of the people, too, the way John read Prufrock, I remember reading it in college, and that's a poem that a lot of people quote over the years. As we know, people in the movie business, you'll be sitting around with them and they'll quote it. And I assume that we all got it in college, or, we picked it up and read somewhere. But it helps me. And the poetry, too, we can, in our own lives, we can read one-to-one. And that's what T.S. Eliot said. Reading a poem is one person speaking to another person. Yeah. And also, I think one of the poet laureates recently, she said, of U.S. said that you have to have big ears, for poetry. You have to slow down. You have to listen a little extra hard with poetry. It's just not like, a TV show that we can get it every minute, right, what's going on out there for the mass. And I think that's good for us to keep our mind alert, and also it enriches our lives.
I love the lowercase that E. Cummings uses. It's humility also. I see that in the lowercase. Just parenthetically, when my wife died, and I included one of Richard Wilbur's, just a quatrain, just 4 little lines from a poem on a Paige in her memorial service, and I wrote to him and said, I'm sorry I didn't ask permission for this. And he said, oh, I'm so grateful that you used the poem's called A Milkweed. And when he mentioned it to me in a letter, he said, he didn't capitalize the word, the M in milkweed. It was like he was doing an E. Cummings thing. It's a wonderful poem. Let me just do it quickly for you. It's called Two Voices in a Meadow. And the first one is a milkweed. Anonymous as cherubs over the crib of God, white seeds are floating out of my burst pod. What power had I before I learned to yield? Shatter me, great wind, I shall possess the field. I chose that poem because my wife always left everything on the stage when she was performing. Well, thank you. But it's combined with, it's called Two Voices in a Meadow, and the other one is called A Stone. It's a milkweed and a stone. As casual as cow dung under the crib of God, I lie where chance would have me, up to my ears in sod. Why should I move? To move befits a light desire. The sill of heaven would founder, did such as I aspire. Just these, just 8 little lines, 4 little lines and 4 little lines. I really went off the subject, sorry.
No, that's fine. I know how much you love Richard Wilbur. You did a marvelous 1-hour reading for us, and I know you have so much knowledge of him. You know, I would just like to talk about a minute about Hart Crane.
Yeah.
Because what's his name? The great Harold Bloom. You know, the great literary critic.
Yeah.
And he had a thesis that the romantic trope began with 4 or 5 lines of Wordsworth in the Prelude, which is like a long 220-page poem that he wrote, I don't know, the years early 1800s. And it was, there's a quote, he said, the thesis of my poem is the development of this young man's mind. And so from that point on, poetry became dealing with the poet's self-conscious, and started getting more and more obscure. And, you know, then only poets sometimes know what the other poets are talking about. But then he took that trope and he said it goes through, all the way to Hart Crane and Wallace Stevens. And that's the end of the romantic trope. That's according to Harold Bloom. And, you know, Hart Crane really did hit that high notes with, his great use of language and his vision. And then the other thing, when The Bridge was published in 1932, somewhere in there, it was around the time he jumped off the back of the ship coming back from Mexico. He had a lot of friends who were new critics, and they liked him, but then they really, blew him out of the water by saying, it's irrational. So that's another thing that poetry has we've become more accepting of the nonsensical. There was a poet named Christopher Smart. I don't know what years he was in, maybe late 17 or somewhere 1800, and he wrote, a poem, My Cat Jeffrey, and he would just get nonsensical. But there's a need for all of that too, and the fun and playfulness of people like E.E. Cummings. So we really put a lot of good different types of poetry, not only today but before, and it just really is. What I think about it too, the shows we do, it's pure content. We're putting the poetry out there, whether it's us reading or you reading the poetry. We're not sitting around just schmoozing. I mean, we are now, but we're talking about what we just read. But I think it's good to put great work out into the world with great readers, as you all are. So, once again, I will just say, lastly, that I'm deeply grateful for all of your fabulous work. They certainly enhance my life with your reading, as does the poetry. So if anybody else wants to say anything, please do. And that's all I can say.
Just thank you, Harry. Thank you so much.